Hey, I'm Tony Buenger. I'm a CMMC Provisional Assessor here at Redspin.
I'm Dr. Thomas Graham, Redspin CISO and CMMC Registered Practitioner.
Redspin is an authorized C3PAO that has passed the CMMC Level 3 assessment as a primary requirement to be authorized to conduct CMMC Level 3 assessments. We're excited to share with you our lessons learned with respect to going through that CMMC Level 3 assessment and share some of those lessons learned with you to help you prepare for your Level 3 assessment down the road. With our first lesson that we call Corralling Your Controlled Unclassified Information, also known as CUI. Redspin learned early on with this first lesson here that it's important to understand where your CUI lives and breathes. So Thomas, can you start us off and tell us what does it mean to corral your CUI?
Essentially, what it means is that you have to have an understanding of your data. You have to have an understanding of CUI from where it's being maintained, where it's being processed, and of course where it's being transmitted from. And this was something that Redspin learned very early on in the process, is that we needed to define that boundary, that enclave, if you will. It's very much, for those who are listening with a military background, it's very much like when you're setting up a forward base camp, to where you identify the location and you identify, what you're going to have in that forward base camp. But one of the most important parts is you're defining that perimeter, that boundary on everything that is separated from outside and inside. And then you also define how you're going to go in and out of that boundary. Being able to properly and quickly and definitively identify that when we were going through our DIVCAC assessment really paid dividends in the long run with their understanding and in their agreement that we really had a grasp on where CUI is maintained in our environment.
That's a great description, Thomas. And as you know, the CMMC defines just what you explained as scoping, and scoping is very important. And it includes all those components that's within that perimeter, right? It includes your facilities. So where's that data located in your facilities? Which systems is storing and processing and transmitting that CUI? What applications are in play? What services are involved in protecting that CUI within that perimeter? And all that is within the scope of an assessment that will be looked at when you do go to become certified for Level 3. So the intent is really to isolate that CUI, wherever possible, to reduce that footprint. As you said, I like your military perimeter analogy, because that's really what it is reduce that footprint, so it's much more difficult for the adversary to get to.
No, absolutely, Tony. I definitely agree with you. And a military analogy here is really appropriate. We're talking about, DoD information and mechanisms that are being put in place to protect information in cyber warfare, as opposed to, physical warfare.
Right, exactly. And the good way to do this, probably one example is it's all about people, processes, and technology, and we'll cover that in a little bit here in a few minutes. Obviously we're going to, the technology is going to help build that perimeter, but it's also about the processes involved and the procedures and the training for the people involved to ensure that they are protecting that data appropriately and adequately. So it's very important to understand that and really to define what we called ours, right, the red zone secure enclave, to where we knew exactly what was inside, who was allowed inside that enclave, and that everyone had their procedures on how to properly protect that CUI.
Yes, and that's some of the lessons learned that we have as we've gone through this process. Is you mentioned secure red zone, but I also remember from the very early days we started getting folks accustomed to talking about the secure enclave, the secure enclave. It wasn't CUI enclave, it wasn't the CMMC, it was secure. So when you were talking, the people and the process and the technologies, A lot of times the people get overlooked in that, but the people are the ones that are going to be performing your work. And the more habitual you get with the reinforcement that this is secure, it is a secure area, it is a secure environment, the more ingrained it gets within your culture as an organization.
No, that's exactly right. Very good point with that. And the technical aspect, although it's very complex for us to build that perimeter technically. We used Microsoft GCC High, which is recommended for level 3. We used a virtual desktop infrastructure VDI environment. Once we got that set up, and you're right, Thomas, it's like we got to set up now. Now we got to put people inside this, and are they ready to actually perform their tasks? We're talking assessors here, CMMC assessors. It's going to be operating in this environment, this secure enclave. Do they understand what it takes to properly handle CUI? And if something does look awry, do they know where to report it?
No, absolutely. And this video lesson, we're kind of talking about, that boundary. And it's good that you brought up GCC High, because what utilization of GCC High allowed for us to do as an organization was we didn't have to stand up any additional physical offices. We didn't have to put, any more physical infrastructure in place. We were able to carve out a virtual secure enclave that was able to be accessed by, our employees, our approved individuals, regardless really of from where they were at or even the technology that they were accessing it with. It is because once they logged in, it established that boundary. Once that connection was made through the VDI infrastructure, there was nothing going in and out of that environment other than what we've explicitly allowed.
Yes, and that's a good point. And from an assessment perspective, the assessor will want to see a clearly defined secure enclave that you have. And from our experience going through, from the assessors that interviewed us, they kept grilling us on looking for any holes within that perimeter. That was pretty grueling, wasn't it, Thomas? It was like they kept going back, even in the middle of the week, near the end of the week, they kept going back to, are you sure the CUI is not leaking from this secure enclave, so to speak, right? That they kept asking and asking and asking, so as they should. So it was very, it's like, why do you keep asking this? Oh yeah, really the objective of this level 3 certification is to ensure that you are adequately protecting CUI from the adversaries.
You're correct, Tony, and despite popular belief, no, you and I did not lose our hair during this assessment. This is just completely ironic.
Yeah, and I was hoping to grow hair through it, but that didn't happen either.
But no, think about it, guys. With any information security, information assurance, cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it, one of the things that a lot of security professionals worry about is mobile devices, the mobility of the information. So one of the lessons that we took, because our organization was all remote before COVID made it in vogue, okay? One of the very first questions we asked ourselves is, how can we make this work from a user base that is geographically dispersed across the US? And so the virtual infrastructure, it really made sense, because regardless if you're logging in from a Mac, you're logging in from a Windows device, a Linux device, an iPhone, an Android device, or your son's iPad at home, once you're logged in, you are in that environment. It is being protected by those boundaries. You're not going to be able to save stuff. It's only going to allow those communications that have been explicitly defined. And I think, in the long run, probably the biggest lessons learned for me is that by doing it that way, we were able to very quickly and very efficiently show the inspection team doesn't matter, where we're at, it is not going to go in or out of this environment, regardless of the technology you are using to first access it.
Yes, and I remember us going through that week of assessment with the, as you said, with the assessment team, and all throughout, it's like we're all kind of talking, whispering each other's ears, like, glad we invested in this technology because it sure did make the assessment process go much smoother. Now, keep in mind, this isn't all about passing an assessment, right? It's all about protecting your data, and we're very confident that the architecture that we stood up technically, and along with training the employees to properly handle CUI, that we're confident that we can protect the CUI that's going to be in our environment.
No, absolutely. And as we go along, further into these lessons learned recordings, we hope to pass along some of that information to whoever, because it's always, the hardest whenever you're the first one up the trail, but hopefully by being first, you can pass along any information that you've learned to those that are coming behind you.
Exactly, and we're going to start wrapping this up, but really going back to the title, corralling your CUI. Our corral is going to look different from your organization's corral. So one of the early things we learned, So one of the early things we learned is, what does our corral look like? What should it look like when we built that corral? And where all the horses inside, ensuring that the horses are trained to work inside that corral. So for your organization, it all depends. If your organization has physical facilities all across the country, that's going to be a different architecture than, say, a medium-sized company such as us, who's mostly virtual. So you've got to really understand your environment and how to architect your environment. For many organizations, you will find you will be re-architecting some of your systems in our environment and how they operate. So to actually be ready to protect that CUI at the CMMC level 3.
No, absolutely. But no, we definitely look forward to the additional recordings, the additional lessons learned, because look, guys, bottom line, it's all about protecting information, and if we can pass along what we did, it's not something that's static. Security, especially cybersecurity, is always learning from itself, better ways to do things. So with talking about the lessons that we learned, hopefully we're going to pass that knowledge on to you guys, and maybe in return you reach out and you say, hey, how about something else that we haven't even thought of, and by working together we can make sure that CUI is maintained in a secure and safe way.
Great, that's good. Yeah, this was fun, Thomas. I can't wait to get on to the next lesson. So we're wrapping up this first lesson on corralling your CUI. Our next lesson is going to be on how do you prepare yourselves for implementing those practices and processes to be ready for that CMMC level 3 assessment.
Look forward to talking again, Tony.
Sounds good. Hope to see you guys next time.